Good day and welcome back to Scriptures Unlocked. We're now on to Genesis chapter 28, where we will now be transitioning to the life of Jacob, moving away from Isaac. So in the first half of the book of Genesis, which covers the period from Genesis 1 to Genesis 11, we looked at the creation of mankind. We looked at the story of the flood, the story of Noah. We looked at the Tower of Babel. And then we started the second half of the book of Genesis in Genesis chapter 12. And so far, we have looked at the life of Abraham when God called him at the age of 75. We have looked at the life of Isaac. And now we're going to be transitioning to the life of Jacob. And Jacob's life will cover from Genesis chapter 28 all the way to Genesis chapter 36. And in chapter 37, we will then transition away from Jacob to look at the life of Joseph. And Joseph's life will take us from Genesis 37 to the end of the book of Genesis, which is Genesis chapter 50. So in this presentation, we'll look at what transpired after Jacob stole his brother's blessing and the subsequent fallout as a result of that. So this presentation is entitled, Isaac Sends Away Jacob. So in Genesis 27, we ended with Esau vowing to kill his brother Jacob because of the stolen blessing. And here's a recap of what took place then. Genesis 27 verse 41 to 45 tells us this. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. And these words of Esau, her elder son, were told to Rebekah. And she sent and called Jacob her younger son, and said unto him, behold, thy brother Esau, as touching thee, doth comfort himself, purposing to kill thee. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice, and arise, flee thou to Laban, my brother to Haran, and tarry with him a few days, until thy brother's fury turn away, until thy brother's anger turn away from thee, and he forget that which thou hast done to him. Then I will send and fetch thee from thence. Why should I be deprived also of you both in one day? And Rebekah said to Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth, who were the Hittites. If Jacob take a wife of the daughters of Heth, such as these which are of the daughters of the land, what good shall my life do me? So this is what transpired prior to Jacob being sent away by his father Isaac. So Genesis 28 verse 1 to 5 records the fallout of what transpired immediately after Esau's plot to kill his brother was revealed. And we now get to Genesis 28, reading from verse 1 to 3. And Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said unto him, thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, thy mother's father, to take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. And God Almighty bless thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of people, and give thee the blessing of Abraham, to thee and to thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abraham. And Isaac sent away Jacob, and he went to Padan Aram unto Laban, son of Bethuel the Syrian, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's and Esau's mother. And here you can see that the transition is now taking place, because Jacob is now being mentioned first, since he now has preeminence over his brother Esau. So from this point onward, every time that Jacob and Esau are mentioned together, Jacob is mentioned first, because Jacob is the one who received the birthright. So what you're seeing here in Genesis chapter 28, verse 1 to 5, is Isaac blessing Jacob in a public ceremony, letting everyone know that Jacob is the one who has indeed received the birthright, and he's the one who will become the patriarch of the family. So Jacob is blessed, and notice that Isaac blessed him according to the blessing that God blessed Abraham with. So the covenant promise that God made with Abraham, which was then passed on to Isaac, Isaac was now transferring that blessing and was telling Jacob that he is the one through whom the Messiah, the seed of the woman, would eventually come. that he would now become the patriarch of the family. So we're now looking at the three patriarchs: Abraham, the father of all nations; Isaac, his heir and son of promise; and now Jacob, who would now become the patriarch, and he would become the ancestor of the Jewish nation. So here, Isaac transferred the covenant blessing of Abraham to his son Jacob, not Esau. So viewers, to avoid tragedy in the family, Isaac sent away Jacob with the blessing of the Abrahamic covenant and charged him not to marry any Canaanite woman, but go to his mother's family in Haran and marry one of his cousins, Laban's daughters. This was a public ceremony with Esau in attendance, and I'll explain how we know this. And Jacob was recognized as the son to whom the birthright and the patriarchal blessing was given. So notice here, Jacob would leave from Beersheba, that's where his family was located, that's where Isaac lived, and he would travel all the way from Beersheba to Haran, to Padan Aram. It was a great distance that he had to travel to get to his mother's brother's home. So notice what transpired after Esau heard and saw that his father Isaac blessed Jacob in his presence. When Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Padan Aram to take him a wife from thence, and that as he blessed him, he gave him a charge. So he heard, saying, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. And that Jacob obeyed his father and his mother, and was gone to Padan Aram. Notice what Esau did. And Esau, seeing that the daughters of Canaan pleased not Isaac his father, then went Esau unto Ishmael, and took unto the wives which he had Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth, to be his wife. So notice that Esau's character was again on display, with a clear contrast drawn between him and Jacob. Notice how he reasoned. Verse 7. When Esau saw that Jacob obeyed his father and his mother, he went and he took another wife, because remember, he had married 2 wives when he was at the age of 40. He went and added a 3rd wife. So Esau was rebellious and vengeful. He was trying to spite his parents, whereas Jacob was obedient, as was mentioned in Genesis 28, verse 7. So you can see the difference in character between Esau and Jacob. And this is precisely why, even before they were born, God chose Jacob as the son through whom the Messiah would come, because God is omniscient. He knows all, and he sees all, and he knows the character of every single individual that has ever lived and will ever live. He knows this, and in his providence, he chose Jacob over Esau. So Isaac gave Jacob the covenant blessing which God bestowed upon Abraham and his descendants when God first called him in Genesis 12. And this was an indication that Jacob would become the ancestor of the seed of the woman, who is none other than Jesus Christ. So let's now look at the covenant that God made with Abraham, because the covenant he made with Abraham would then be passed on to Isaac, and Isaac was now passing it on to Jacob. So notice what God said to Abraham when he called him, and we are going back in time to Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 to 3. Now Jehovah had said unto Abraham, that was when his name was Abraham, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And notice the promises that God made to Abraham then. And I will make of thee a great nation. The nation that God had in mind was the nation of Israel. That is a nation that would descend from Jacob, because Jacob's name would be changed to Israel. So God said, And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. And Jehovah appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land, that's the land of Canaan, that he was sending him into. And there builded he an altar unto Jehovah, who appeared unto him. So God initiated and established his covenant with Abraham and his seed after him. And notice again, Genesis 17, verse 2 to 6, as God reaffirmed his covenant that he made with Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. And God said, and I will make my covenant between me and thee, speaking to Abraham, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And I want you to notice that the same covenant that God made with Abraham is the same covenant that he reaffirmed with Isaac, and that Isaac was now going to reaffirm and pass on to Jacob. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, as for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations, plural, nations, because God's plan through Abraham, the blessing will be passed on to every single nation, not just the Jewish nation, not just Israel, but every single nation, because the nation of Israel, who would receive the oracles of God, they were to teach the surrounding nations about Jehovah, and that they would come to worship the only true God as their God. So God was saying here that he would establish his covenant with Abraham, and that Abraham would be a father of many nations. And this was even before Abraham had any children. Neither shall thy name anymore be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And this was fulfilled because Abraham's descendant, Esau, became a nation. Jacob became a nation, an independent nation, Israel. Esau became Edom. Jacob's sons from his concubine Keturah, one of them was Midian, and Midian became a nation. They were called the Midianites. So God fulfilled his promise that Abraham became the father of many nations. And note what God goes on to say here in Genesis 17, verse 7 and 8. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan. So there's no question as to which land God was referring to. All the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. So this covenant blessing was passed on to Isaac, Abraham's son and heir. And notice, God would then appear to Isaac, and he would reestablish and reaffirm the covenant he made with Abraham to Isaac. Genesis 26 verse 1 tells us this. And there was a famine in the land, beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And Jehovah appeared unto him and said, go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I tell thee of. So he was to remain in the land of Canaan. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. So here in verse 3, God reaffirmed and established with Isaac the same covenant that he made with Abraham. And notice what God goes on to say. And I will make thy seed, speaking to Isaac, to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Does that sound familiar? It is the same thing that God said to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. Why? Because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. And when we get to verse 24 of Genesis 26, Jehovah appeared unto him the same night, that's Isaac, and said, I am the God of Abraham thy father. Fear not, for I am with thee, and will bless thee, and multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. So viewers, in Genesis 28, God was about to establish his covenant with Jacob. And from this point until Genesis 36, there will be a transition away from Isaac, with the life of Jacob becoming the focal point of the story. So let's get back to Genesis 28, reading from verse 10. So this is after Jacob left his father's house in Beersheba. And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took up the stones of that place and put them for his pillows and lay down in that place to sleep. And something strange happened to Jacob. He was now going to encounter God for the very first time for himself. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. So Jacob had a strange dream where he had a divine encounter with the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac for the very first time. And behold, Jehovah stood above it and said, he was speaking to Jacob in this dream, and he said this, I am Jehovah, God of Abraham, thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. So notice, God was here establishing the same covenant that he made with Abraham initially. He was establishing it with Jacob. The three patriarchs, God not just established the covenant, but God would appear physically to them. So notice what we are now going to read. And God said to Jacob, I am Jehovah, God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south, and in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Notice that exact phrase again. In thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. The same thing was said to Abraham, the same thing was said to Isaac, and God was now saying the same thing to Jacob. And when you compare Genesis 13, verse 14 to 17, you will see that God said the exact same thing to Abraham when he was telling him about the land that he was giving him. He mentioned that he will be multiplied and that he will spread out to the west, to the east, to the north, and the south. You can compare Genesis 13, verse 14 to 17 with Genesis 28, verse 14. So viewers, God appeared to Jacob and introduced himself as the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac, because at this point in time in Jacob's life, Jacob has not yet accepted his father or his grandfather's God as his God. God then repeats the Abrahamic covenant to Jacob that was first mentioned in Genesis 12. And notice what God goes on to say to Jacob in Genesis 28, verse 15, in this dream. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land. So he was now leaving the land of Canaan to go to Haran, and God was now promising him that he would bring him again into the land of Canaan. For I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. This was a life-changing experience for Jacob, who was now at a critical crossroads or juncture in his life, seeing he had to leave his father's house. Let's now examine Jacob's dream, where he saw a staircase stretching from heaven to earth, with the angels of God ascending and descending. Viewers, God was reassuring Jacob that even though he was now leaving his father's house to go to Haran, the Almighty would provide angelic protection along the way and ultimately bring him back to the land that he was now promising Jacob. Jacob's dream of this ladder was also symbolic of Jesus Christ being the ladder provided to access heaven, and this was made quite clear in John chapter 1, verse 51. And here on screen you can see a picture of Jacob sleeping. And in this dream, he saw a staircase descending from heaven with its base set upon the earth. And on the staircase, you can see angels ascending to heaven and angels descending from heaven. And Jesus Christ, many years later, would reference this dream that Jacob had, and he would identify himself as this staircase or this ladder upon whom these angels were ascending and descending. Let's read about it in John chapter 1, reading from verse 45 to 51. Philip findeth Nathanael and saith unto him, We have found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, Can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? Philip said unto him, Come and see. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, and said of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. Nathanael said unto him, Whence knowest thou me? Jesus answered and said unto him, Before that Philip called thee, when thou was under the fig tree, I saw thee. Nathanael answered and said unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. Jesus answered and said unto him, Because I said unto thee, I saw thee under the fig tree, believest thou? Thou shalt see greater things than these. And he said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, hereafter ye shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Viewers, Jesus references Jacob's dream and identifies himself as the stairway by which mankind can access heaven. Jesus Christ is the only means by which heaven comes down to us, since Christ is the bridge and the link between heaven and earth. In Jacob's dream, the Almighty God stood above the ladder or the staircase, which was set up on the earth, because God is the Lord of heaven and earth, according to Matthew 11, verse 25. And Jesus Christ is the only way to the Father. And this is what he said in John 14, verse 6. Jesus said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. So in order for us to get to the Father, whose house is in heaven, we have to come through Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ is the only means. He is not just a way. He is the way to the Father. So Jesus Christ is the only way for us to access heaven. And that is why the angels were ascending and descending upon Jesus Christ, who is the Son of Man. So angels receive messages from God. Angels are ministering spirits. They receive messages from God, and they leave heaven and they come to earth. And the way by which they do this is through Jesus Christ, who brings grace to us. So notice, as we get back to Genesis 28, verse 16, and Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, Surely Jehovah is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid, and said, How dreadful is this place! This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And the house of God in Hebrew is the word Bethel. And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of that city was called Luz at the first. So Jacob changed the name of the place because of his encounter with God, and because he saw the angels of God ascending and descending, coming from heaven and going to heaven. He said that this is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, If God will be with me, as he has promised, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall Jehovah be my God. And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give thee the tenth unto thee. So Jacob vowed, and he made a promise to God, that if God fulfill his word to him, then he would accept Jehovah as his God. So after his encounter with God in a dream, Jacob made a commitment to accept Jehovah, the name of the only true God, as his God. In the dream, God reaffirmed the covenant initially made with his grandfather Abraham, but Jacob was now putting conditions before he would claim the Almighty as his God. God, as he always does and always will, kept his promise to Jacob. And 20 years later, because Jacob spent 20 years in Haran, as we will discuss as we proceed further in the book of Genesis. So 20 years later, God would remind him of this encounter and fulfill his word. Notice what we are told in Genesis 31, verse 3 and verse 13. And this was when Jacob was about to leave Haran after 20 years. And Jehovah said unto Jacob, Return unto the land of thy fathers, go back to the land of Canaan, and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And notice now that in verse 13, that God would remind him of the promise and the vow that he made when he had that dream. God introduced himself to him as, I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointedst the pillar, and where thou vowedst a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. So Jacob would have many other divine encounters with God, and he would honor his commitment, so much so that when we get to Exodus 3 verse 6, the Almighty will refer to himself as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And this was the first time that this exact phrase is ever mentioned in the scripture. So Jehovah became the God of the three patriarchs, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. This is how God introduced himself to Moses at the burning bush. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. In fact, viewers, this exact phrase appears a total of 7 times throughout scripture. And Jacob's name would eventually be changed later to Israel. And Jehovah would also be known as the God of Israel. So in other words, Jehovah would be known as the God of Israel, and Israel is the new name of Jacob. Here on screen, you can see I've done a keyword search for the exact phrase, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. It occurs 21 times in 7 verses in the King James Version. 3 times in Exodus, once in Matthew, once in Mark, once in Luke, and once in the book of Acts. And notice as well, the God of Israel, that exact phrase occurs 90 times in 88 verses in the King James Version. And you can see the various times that it appears in the various books. So notice I put also on screen a verse, Jeremiah 7 verse 3, where God is speaking. And he says, thus saith Jehovah of hosts. And notice how he describes himself, the God of Israel. In other words, he's the God of Jacob. Amend your ways and your doings, and I will cause you to dwell in this place. And this was said to the people of Judah just before they were taken captives into Babylon. They were sinning against God, and God was saying to them, I am the God of Israel. I am your God. Amend your ways, change your ways and your doings, and I will cause you not to be carried away, but I will cause you to dwell in this place. But they refused to listen to God, and as a result, they were carried away into Babylonian captivity for 70 years. So viewers, that brings us to the end of Genesis 28, where we looked at a transition from Isaac to Jacob. In the next presentation on Genesis 29, we'll now see Jacob's initial life when he got to Haran, and that he would fall in love with one of Laban's daughter, Rachel, and what would transpire. So from now on, from Genesis 28 all the way to Genesis 36, we'll be studying the life and times of Jacob. And we'll see all that he went through as he navigated life in Haran, living amongst Laban and his family. And you'll see that God, as he promised, would be with Jacob. And even though Laban would cheat him many times and try to rob him, Jacob kept his faith, and God was with him until God told him 20 years later to leave and return back to his father's house. So stay tuned, continue to enjoy the series. And if you're enjoying the series so far, I would encourage you to please like, share, and subscribe so that others can similarly be blessed by these stories as we look at the beginning of the nation of Israel. Because all that I'm doing now in the second half of the book of Genesis is to chart the course as to how Israel became a nation. And it all started with the call of one man, Abraham, who God made a covenant with, and his descendants. Abraham would have Isaac, Isaac would have Jacob, Jacob's name would be renamed, he would then become known as Israel, and his 12 sons, each son became a tribe, and they were known as the 12 tribes of Israel. And from those 12 sons, Israel would grow into a multitude as God promised. So you can see that God has always kept his promise that he has made to humanity. And it is through Israel that the seed of the woman, Jesus Christ, would eventually come. And God would fulfill his promise that he made to Abraham, that in thee, Abraham, and thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So my family, your family, we are all blessed as human beings because of the covenant that God made with Abraham. And that blessing was God's only begotten son, Jesus Christ, whom he sent through the nation of Israel to become the savior of the world so that all of us can have access and get back in a right relationship with the Father. And that's why Jesus said in John 14, verse 1 to 3, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. For in my Father's house there are many mansions, and if it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, where's Jesus now? He's in heaven, that where I am, there ye may be also. So Jesus wants us to be where his Father is, and that is why he will come again one day to receive us unto himself, so that we can live together with his Father through the ceaseless ages of eternity. May God bless us, and may we continue to study his words to prove all things. Have yourselves a great day.